In a country where everyone seems angry, where accusation and blame are the order of the day, when rage is rewarded, can things get better?
I think it's about being heard.
Men and women everywhere want to be acknowledged.
I maintain that if somebody feels heard, then you're getting somewhere.
Respect is critical.
We should just learn to tolerate and accept.
In the previous episode, I asked my guests if they think Americans even want the state of the nation to improve, or if there's actually a sense that people maybe don't want things to get better and instead would rather have their political tribe, their political team, just win. In this episode, my guests and I explore if people do want things to get better, how exactly would that happen? How can the American public, the yous and the me's of the world, how can we make things better? My guests had some sincerely thoughtful reactions that I thought displayed some serious wisdom. Their thoughts centered on issues like simply being heard, respect for others, and surprise, surprise, trying not to insult people. On the one hand, some of their responses might seem obvious, but on the other, in the world we live in, such perspectives are often anything but obvious.
I think it's about being heard. I'm honest with you. I think if people feel like someone is listening to them, that they can speak their truth, they can be understood, and that informs decisions that policymakers make. I think that's going to help. And I think that's why Donald Trump really tapped into that populism when he was running for office. He really tapped into that unhappy working class mentality that the Democrats hadn't tapped into. They did not tap into this. But he was tapping into it to a group that did not, they wanted to be heard. And he was listening to them and saying things that they wanted him to say.
Try to do it on a communication level is establish recognition of their uniqueness. What I have discovered in the area of sales, the many political victories I've been blessed with to played a part in, David, what I think you might have some insight on this. I think at the core, men and women everywhere want to be acknowledged, that they exist.
I maintain that if somebody feels heard, then you're getting somewhere. And legislators have a hard time asking the questions. They're used to answering the questions, having people ask them the questions. And for a legislator to ask a question indicates to me that they want to know what I'm thinking. Then I feel heard. I've put my voice out there, even if everybody else's voice that they have to represent goes a different direction. It's stuck there.
And so being able to sit and listen to people is an art that we have lost, unfortunately, especially in the day of social media. And we can glean a lot from people just by listening to their stories. And I think that also goes well with the worth that we have as human beings, because I think everybody feels like they feel valued when they are listened to.
When a person really values me and what I believe, they value my perception, my perspective, and they acknowledge me for who I am, respect me, and they say, I just thank you for being who you are, and you've got some pretty valid points that I hadn't thought of before. I hadn't considered that. And I'd like to know more. Tell me more about that. When someone treats me that way, I start to soften up. When that happens, that's it. There's a thaw. Like, okay, maybe I do need to work with this person or listen to them. That's where the change is at. And that does happen.
The degree to which people seriously value just being heard cannot be understated. And I especially like Demetra's perspective that when she simply feels like somebody takes her seriously, she can be more open. She can be more likely to work with someone else, let the walls come down a bit. The next issue guest raised was the importance of respect.
I think respect is a great example of how do you have a community when your community doesn't respect each other. You're going to be the Hatfields and the McCoys. We all have an opinion. It doesn't make it right or wrong in the universal view of things. More than likely, we're more partially right and therefore partially wrong. But respect is critical.
And I think if we go into it with an open mind, and we go into these discussions or debates, however you want to describe them, with the idea that, okay, I'm going to start with the assumption that you're not stupid. I'm going to start with the assumption that you're not nefarious. I'm going to start with the assumption that you're not power hungry, or something like that. I'll start with that assumption. Now, I may enter into the discussion and find out you actually are nefarious, but okay. But I think we're going to find out that really there aren't that many people on the other side who are that way. I can still say they're wrong. That's okay. They're wrong, but that's not that being wrong is not the same is not the same thing as being nefarious or being criminal.
They're, so you just have to understand that, they're in a different place than you, and that's okay. We still have to live together and work together and be a country together. And so we should just learn to tolerate and accept.
Unsurprisingly, people across the right, left, and center spoke about the value of being respected. I'd like to think this is obvious, but in this world, it's just not. In so many ways, it feels like these kinds of small gestures, like listening, respect, they go a long way in softening some of our problem sets. The third topic my guest spoke about is related to the first two, but in some ways is sort of a mirror image. Not shaming people, not insulting people, not ripping into people.
I have never been so convinced by someone's argument that I'm like, wow, you just totally shamed me, so I'm going to change my mind. It just makes people dig in deeper. And so that perspective where we are unable to change or unable to see any sort of value in someone else's argument, I don't know, it's frustrating. And I do feel like there's a lot more of that. And it feels like a lot of it's because we need to win. We need to be on the side of right.
I have some friends that are like that will absolutely not hear me out whatsoever. But then I have one or two that are like me that will sit down and have a conversation. And they will say, I hear you and I kind of get what you're saying, but I'm not sure that I agree with you. And I'm like, well, that's fine. We can have this conversation. We can, I have my, a man that I really respected and honored as an older gentleman in my life said, agree to disagree, but don't be disagreeable. I've kind of lived by that. We can disagree, but we don't have to be ugly to each other. We don't have to be hateful. I mean, if we stopped a lot of the bickering, we could sit down and have a conversation and come up with ideas and brainstorm about better ways to fix things. But we have to be willing to have the conversation, first of all. Second of all, we have to agree to be respectful about it. And I would always show respect to that other person. I'm never going to belittle somebody or diminish their life experience or why they feel the way they do or the way they believe that they do. I'd never do it. I expect the same in return though. I expect the same. And as long as we can meet on those grounds, I think a lot of things would change.
As a society, we have become more vocal in declaring other people wrong or evil, or even in an attempt at humor, calling names or debasing them in some way. And that has always really irritated me. That
we can still disagree without, you're familiar with the term ad hominem?
Yeah.
Okay. Without name calling. Okay. And that's a typical, a lot of people, as soon as I don't have an argument to come back for your last statement, well, you're just a SOB, you're just a poor, very, very lousy, whatever. No. That doesn't do anything to the conversation either. Okay. I can't answer that. I still think my way is right. I can't exactly explain why, but in my heart, I think I'm right. And I reject what you're saying. Okay, that's cool. I didn't expect to change your mind. Now you know where I'm at and how I got here.
I love what Jeff said there. I've never been in a situation where someone insulted me and shamed me, and then I went, wow, you totally shamed me, and now I'm going to change my mind. Folks, that sort of sums up a lot of it. Like I said earlier, we live in this world where anger, insult, rage, and shame are rewarded, with people ripping into each other, especially on digital media, and all the while wondering why the nation seems to be going straight to hell. And my friends, I'm guilty of this too. We all judge members of some invisible other tribe, all while wondering why they're so judgmental of us. If we listen a bit more to the folks in this episode, I think the nation would be better off. I'm going to end this with a story from Jeff that sort of illustrates the entirety of this episode of one example from his time in Sri Lanka.
Listen. And it seems so simple, but it's not. It's hard. And that involves asking questions without trying to counteract responses, but genuine questions. When we, for graduate school, spent 3 months in Sri Lanka, we were training small NGOs over there in working with their communities. And Sri Lanka, it was right as their civil war was starting back up, and fascinating time to be there. A predominantly Buddhist country, smaller Muslim minority, and then an incredibly small Christian minority within that too. And one of the groups we were working with was a Christian church group, and they really wanted to know, how do we change the people in our community? Like, how do we change their minds, and how do we convince them that they're wrong, and all of this stuff. And the lesson we taught over and over was listen to them, genuinely listen, not listen and then respond, not listen and then argue, not listen to, figure out how I can win, but listen to get to know this person. And how it worked out was we were traveling around the country, a few days here, a few days there, and we repeated ourselves several times. But we did this the first time with this group, and we came back a couple of weeks later to the same group. And one of the women was so excited. She and her neighbor had been, enemies for years, like argued about everything, just did not like each other. They're from different religions. They're, whatever. She was like, she's just so stubborn, all this stuff. And she said, I made it a goal to go and listen to her and just to ask about life. And there was something going on with her kids and health and stuff. And it became something where she said, I knew more about her through the end of that conversation than I did in several years of, living by her and arguing with her. And they became friends. I don't know that anyone changed their religion or their mindset or whatever, but it bridged that divide where they looked at it and said, on the surface, we should be divided, at least, if not enemies. But listening and being genuinely interested in someone and finding out more about them ended with them being friends. And so it took some of those typical divisions that are on the surface, and it got rid of them in a way. I mean, they're still there, but they realized maybe those aren't as powerful as we think we are. I mean, that's my big challenge for myself too. And my encouragement is I work with people all the time that have different views. I, interact with people in the community that have different views. And even within my own family, there's different views, whether that's my immediate family, my extended family, like there's a wide variety of perspectives, but I want to understand people and get back to that core value I have of them as a human and someone in the image of God. And there's a reason they have their perspective. Maybe it's pain, maybe it's not, maybe it's privilege, maybe it's not, maybe it's some experience they've had or where they've lived or what they ate for dinner last night. I don't know. But as long as I make assumptions about it, I'm still not going to know unless I take the time to listen.
This wraps up season 2 of Nobody's Side. I've continued to adore making this show. I've loved speaking with the folks that I've gotten to interview. I've enjoyed learning from all the folks that I've spoken with. This season, in a lot of ways, was gloomier than I'd expected. And I expect to see more gloom as I interview more folks. In a sense, as I continue to make this show, I'm learning maybe more than anybody else. But I hope you're enjoying it. I hope you're learning too, and I hope you're finding this as valuable as I am. My name is David Combs. This is Nobody's Side. See you in the next season.